man's got red blues, all right.
It is January 5th, 2018. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and simulcast and rebroadcast on the Gway, CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us streaming live and streaming in a loop later at www.ltnradionet.com. And, of course, we are Facebook Live. We are streaming live on Facebook. So if you are catching us on the internet and you want to take a look at what us bums look like in studio, you can go to our Facebook group.
Speak for yourself.
I was. I said us. You can go to Facebook, our Facebook group page, which is Let's Talk Native, and you can get your show. And of course, afterwards, the show will repost as a show that was live, not is live, and you can catch it after the fact. So if you miss any portion of this, or you have to step away, you can always come back and catch it later. So do so. I am John Kane. I am the show's host and producer, and I'm joined in studio by our good friend Robbie John, and I want to welcome Robbie back to the program. And, of course, Matt Hill.
How's it going?
And I got Jake Proud just barely off camera at this point, but I got Jake Proud off camera. He's running the board and keeping an eye on our cameras, not only for our Facebook live stream, but for so we can package up this video for our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I encourage you to join our channel, subscribe to it, and then you'll get notifications via email or otherwise. To look for the videos that we post. We do post these shows up as videos, but we also produce some videos on various topics from time to time. And if you go to our channel, you can see some of the videos that we've addressed, everything from some of the gaming issues to racism and other things. And we'll do more of that as we go forward. Now, I have addressed racism in the larger context, defining what racism is on one of those videos. But, I haven't really talked specifically about some of our circumstances that many of us, but our kids face on a daily basis. We had a recent incident occur here in the local town, the town that borders the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, Gowanda, and they have their own school district, and many of our kids attend that school. On this territory, on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, we actually have kids that are the territory is essentially divided, if you will, or has kids going to three separate school districts: the Gowanda Central School District, Silver Creek, and Lakeshore. Is there another one too?
Possible North Collins? No,
I don't think on
sure.
territory, but maybe it's possible. It's possible, but clearly the majority, or almost all the kids here, are somewhat separated by those three school districts, and of course our kids play sports in those school districts as well, and of course because this population is divided, and I don't even know if it's divided evenly in thirds, but divided amongst these at least three school districts, that makes our kids even that much more of a minority in those school districts. These school districts are predominantly white. The teachers are almost entirely staffed by white people, and I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It's just a matter of fact. The coaching staffs, pretty much all white people, and there's a few Native people that are involved, particularly in sports like lacrosse at the coaching level. But this is the circumstance. We have a population here on the Cattaraugus territory, a total population of only about 3,000 or 4,000 people. Out of that, our kids are divided amongst those three school districts. Now, I don't have much experience with Silver Creek or with Lake Shore, but my 3 kids all graduated from Gowanda, and most of the our friends, Robbie, your nephews go to Gowanda. Matt, your kids graduated or are graduating from Gowanda. We hope. No, so we.
What do you mean?
Just kidding. Well, they could transfer.
Yeah.
so we most of our experience in this room is associated with Gowanda School District, and I will say unequivocally that Gowanda is still our kids still experience racism on a fairly regular basis in that school district, and I'm not saying that it is the overt racism that people would associate it with race wars and that kind of stuff. But it's more than just subtle. And we've seen this in a number of ways. I know when my son was playing basketball and football and lacrosse at Gowanda, he experienced some comments. I remember, we've always had decent athletes that come from this territory in all 3 of those school districts. And when I think about the gym that that has been here forever, it's at the Sailor Building, and I remember John experiencing with one of the coaches condemning one of the players, saying, "You're playing for me now. You're not playing sailor ball." And my son asked, "What is that supposed to mean?" Because the reality is, 5 of the kids which should have been the starting team of that team were Native kids who had most of their experience playing at the Sailor Gym. And that's the Sailor Building, the gym at the Sailor Building. And so for this white coach to make a statement that implied that sailor ball was somehow beneath the level of sportsmanship or sports accomplishment, for the Gowanda School District was racially motivated, that comment. And John got into it pretty good with the coach over that. And the coach wasn't even talking to John. He was talking to another player at the time. But he took particular offense to it. And we've seen that kind of thing. I'll go back also. And again, I'm not trying to make this all about my family. But when John graduated from high school, he was one of the kids who insisted on wearing an eagle feather. And he was told very clearly, if you're going to wear an eagle feather with your cap and gown, they may not let you participate in the ceremony. He did it anyway, and it was without incident. But nobody else did it that year. And in years the years that would follow, little by little, more and more kids were doing more of that, and it had become a bit of a national issue. It had been in the papers and in various places. And again, the idea that a Native kid wearing an eagle feather on his cap was met with resistance. It actually culminated, when almost 10 years after my son graduated, when Ross's daughter Marky had graduated. They actually asked the school board if they could wear an eagle feather, and the school board said, "No, we will not give you permission to wear an eagle feather." Now, the superintendent, who is a guy that I have known for many years, and frankly, I like the guy, Chuck Rinaldi, he tried to explain why the school board voted the way they voted. And in his letter, he used really, really inappropriate language. He had suggested in almost an analogy that by letting kids wear an eagle feather, it would open up the door for people to wear swastikas, Nazi symbols and Wiccan symbols and stuff like that. So I blasted Chuck pretty badly. And Matt, you remember that. I blasted him pretty badly on the radio, and we were in Buffalo at the time. I wrote a couple of pieces on Facebook. I blasted him pretty badly. And Chuck reached out to me. He actually came on the show with not only with Marky, but her brother Frank, who also had worn an eagle feather at graduation. He came on the show in Buffalo, make the trip out to Buffalo to appear on my show to really apologize for the way he addressed it, for the words he used, the inappropriateness, and all of that. And I, to this day, I get along quite well with Chuck Rinaldi, and he made it very clear that he screwed up.
He says he's listening, by the way.
Oh,
Hi, Chuck.
So yeah, if you're listening, Chuck, we went through that. But you know what? His apology was sincere. It was gracious, and And nobody felt that that he was trying to skirt the issue. And in fact, he actually went on record to support the kids getting this thing nailed down, so nobody would ever face this debate again. And in fact, now kids, there's no question that a graduating student at Gowanda can wear an eagle feather, and it got put to rest. And part of it was some of the advocacy from Chuck Rinaldi after, again, using something that using an analogy was pretty inappropriate. So these are examples of. And again, they may not seem like the most overt racist kind of things, but when it comes to the athletics, we know, with the possible exception of lacrosse, our kids have to exceed athletic standards to get a fair shake on most of these starting teams. If they've got a white kid on that team,
they have to be above average. I mean,
yeah,
quite a bit above
really
average
exceed
to even be acknowledged in the school or by the coach or to any level at that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Turn that microphone right down towards you a little bit. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And that's just it. Now, if I've seen over the years, including when my kids were in school, that any of the prominent white athletes, they had people falling over them, talking about, oh, these guys are bound for Division I, and really praising how good these and there were some decent athletes, and I'm not condemning any of them. So this kind of brings us to where what has transpired over the last few weeks. Well, and actually, maybe
when you
even
mentioned,
before that.
I'm sorry, but I know you mentioned Division I, but you know what? It doesn't really stop at that either. It's like, not just the coaches level, but as far as like guidance counselors, I don't know to what extent they're assisting our Native children in prepping them for college or even taking the right courses to go to that Division I level.
No, as far as the high
it's
school is
not.
concerned, if they can get a cap and gown on our kids without them dropping out, then they feel like they've accomplished something. So kind of shuffling our kids through the doors is kind of the issue, and I feel strongly about that.
I don't know. My son's guidance counselor, she's been on my boy pretty good. He's getting an accelerated Regents diploma this coming up for graduation.
Well, that's good. I mean,
she kept on him for that,
and I'm glad to hear that. Obviously, we don't have a very. I mean, even the graduation rates aren't that great for Native kids. And I know a few years ago, it had hit a real low. I mean, when you looked at again even Salamanca with the Allegheny territory, and and when you looked at the rate of accomplishment, it was really, really low, and it was really concerning. So I mean, our kids have not done well in these schools in general. And again, I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, and there certainly have been exceptions, even exceptions with some of these kids athletically. But where we kind of got into a situation recently was Gowanda had a pretty good basketball team last year, and they had two kids who were showing some rather exceptional abilities, and one of them was a non-native kid, and one was a native kid. And for whatever reason, the native kid decided that he didn't want to play at Gowanda this year, so he transferred to Silver Creek.
They did have another one also that decided not even to play this year because of the coach.
Well, and so some of these tensions are, and whether they are or they just feel it, and we can have that debate. They feel like they have racial connotation associated with it, and oftentimes it's the kind of commentary that is said, the way a native kid is treated versus the way a white kid is treated, and we see it, and it's real. So it isn't just our kids being overly sensitive. It is something that our kids are facing on a fairly regular basis. So what transpired here was the kid who had transferred out to and that's Germani Benton had transferred over to Silver Creek, and again a decent ball player, and it left Gowanda with a team that had lost what would have been one of their starters this year, and apparently they had an injury to another player or something like that, from what I understood. So they still had their one kid that they were touting as their all-star. And he had a pretty good game a couple of weeks ago. Scored like 43 points in a tournament game. It wasn't a very evenly matched contest, apparently. He pulled down 30 rebounds. And this is a kid who, from last year to this year, put on a little bit of size, put on a little bit of muscle, and his coach was singing his praises. But he didn't just stop at talking about how well this kid had performed. He felt it was necessary to talk about the kid who had transferred and saying that Gowanda, although they may not be as go as deep into playoffs, is what he suggested, he still insisted that they were a better team without that player. So he was already kind of showing some scorn to the player who had left Gowanda, who was a native player. And then went so far to say is they're actually a better team without him because the kid was a ball hog. So, I mean, now these are current kids playing sports. These are current kids in high school. And again, one of the things I think that helps our kids get through high school is some of this co-curricular activity, the sports. And without it, we probably would have a higher dropout rate. So the idea that this coach and would offer these comments condemning Germani, and even in an interview and an article in the paper that was meant to praise his player, it stirred the pot. And I know part of the reason I'm even doing this show is because I've gotten multiple calls. I've gotten text messages and Facebook messages, and a lot of people have been feeding me some of this information. And it was my intention to address it eventually. As it turned out back up a little bit. So after the outrage was expressed, this coach gave another interview to the Dunkirk paper here, the Observer, and the Observer was touting this interview as an apology. Yet when you read the interview and you read his statement, there's not an apology in the whole statement.
I would like to know if he even apologized to the parents or even to Germani himself.
No, from what I understand, and I've been asking around, there was no such apology. What he did in the interview was owned the inappropriateness of his comments. He said, "Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. It was inappropriate." And then he did try to praise Germani for being a good athlete and for being a good ball player. So he backed away from calling him a ball hog and a detriment to his team from the year before. But he never came right out and said and expressed any remorse for his remarks, for his condemnation of a student still in school, still trying to make his way in both, his athletics and his academics. He expressed no remorse for his comments. He just said, "Yeah, what I said was inappropriate," and then actually tried to justify it as well. You feel a little bit hurt when a player leaves your team, so you take shots at him in the newspaper. Apparently, a kid.
That's something colleges would look at when they go to research an athlete to go somewhere. I mean, you're going to look at past history, and if the coach thinks that's putting a bad mark on them to begin with, and it's not even the fact that it's not even meant to be there. I mean, that's not even the situation. A good coach would have been able to learn how to work with both athletes, work together with them instead of saying,
"Yeah, that's more of a function of coaching." If he's saying that one of his players was a ball hog,
that's his fault.
That's his fault for not for coaching the team in such a way that he doesn't have an even distribution. And from what I understand, in the current situation, there is not even distribution of plays. The plays are all driven as they have, in years past, when they have a premier white player, that is the player who gets all of the plays are driven towards him or her. Because I say the same thing. I go back to some of the female athletes, and we've had some great girls from this community playing for Gowanda and other schools, and they have never been treated, in my opinion, with the fairness or the support that the non-native players have had. So in this situation, this coach, he gives what I think was a pretty pitiful or pathetic apology.
I don't even think it was an apology.
I mean, the paper called an apology, and I don't know if he actually called it an apology, but there was no apology in the article in the paper. Now, there was also no statement from the Gowanda school, no statement from the superintendent, no statement from the dean of students or the athletic director. Nothing. There was nothing that came out of Gowanda. Gowanda was absolutely silent on this issue. Now, there was some outrage that was still being expressed here, and of course, there was no indication in the article that Germani Benton was native, and other than the picture of this kid.
The only thing I know the school board was going to do, they were going to handle it in one of their meetings, either Monday or Tuesday evening, but the way the situation worked out, they didn't need to have to follow through with that meeting, from my understanding.
Well, I mean, so what happened was the coach resigned. And whether he resigned because he was going to get fired anyway or whatever, but the coach resigned. But even, and again, even if the school board and the administration of the school had intended to deal with it, they should have offered a statement, because this was already becoming a public debate because of the newspaper columns. So the Gowanda school failed to address this properly. So then the coach resigns. And as you indicated, you went to a game, was it just even last night? Or
yeah, like 2 nights ago,
a couple of nights ago.
Yeah.
And apparently the school never appropriately addressed the student body over this issue, because there was some tensions in the room. It was a game that, again, the Gowanda player, and what's his name? Nate Brody.
Yeah.
It was a fairly full gym, not because it was necessarily a classic rivalry game, but it looked like he was poised to break a Gowanda scoring record. And of course, there was also a lot of people in the gym, quite possibly because of the attention and the.
It was an exceptional crowd. I mean, there's more than I go to most of the games, and
because your nephews play.
Yeah, because they play.
Well, they're on the team.
Yeah, but that's another thing. But
that's a whole other issue.
But there's and it was hard to determine if they were there to watch Brady break the record for scoring, or if they were there because of the controversy. So when as I'm watching the game, I see a sign held up and it said, "We want Bobstein back." So
which is the name of the coach. The coach's name was Andy Bobstein. So students were elevating a sign saying they wanted the coach back who had resigned, and the
athletic director had to go into the stands and take the sign, folded it up, took it away or whatever. And then I was actually, the first thing I thought, I was kind of disappointed, because I felt that was the opportunity for the Gowanda school to take advantage and kind of make it a teaching experience to the kids and let them know the situation, and that kind of thing shouldn't have happened. That sign should not have, to me, have
and
been
if they had
in there.
approached the student body and explained what the circumstance was, why what Coach Bobstein had done was inappropriate. Well, I mean, they don't have to explain why it was inappropriate, but just to say what he did was inappropriate, and as a result of that controversy, he was, he had relieved himself of that position, and that the students just had to accept the fact that adults make these mistakes too, and I guess the reason, I wanted to do this show in particular is because what we miss in all of this is what makes racism the problem that it is that it's not just about disliking somebody because they're different than you. Racism is about the system, a systemic problem, a problem where the institutions, the governments, the schools, the people who have power have the ability to use that power to support the people like them and hold people down that are not like them. And this is what we see in the racial tensions with black people, with Native people of color in general, that there's still a white dominant society. Now, the other thing that's interesting is, from what I understand, is that the athletic director, who's the guy from Lancaster, is it Colbrick or what's his name?
That I'm not sure.
I saw it in the article. Well, but it turns out that one of the guys whose responsibility it was for this thing, which gets into a whole other issue, is from Lancaster, New York. And Lancaster is a school that recently went through a lot of tensions associated with their mascot, because they were calling themselves the Redskins, and the school board unanimously voted to change that. But many of people in that territory or in that village were pissed, and the tensions that were existing between the village of Lancaster and the 3 school districts that the Native kids from this territory go to, as well as the Akron school district where the Senecas from Tonawanda attend, they were actually boycotting. In fact, even Niagara Wheatfield, where the Tuscarora kids go, these school they had refused to participate in athletic activity with the village of Lancaster. So, in part of the decision making and the administration to deal with this circumstance rested on a guy from a community that that has been tied up and embroiled with some of these very kind of racial tensions. Ones in which, and here's the irony of a village like Lancaster, who had a name like the Redskins, they would make racist remarks when they had to compete against teams that had Native kids on it, like they were going to own their identity.
I still hear that at my nephew's lacrosse games every year to this day. There's always somebody from the crowd, probably because they don't think nobody can hear them or identify them. They're yelling racial remarks or
they can be heard, but they can't be identified, and that's the issue. I mean, I guess I should have brandished my shirt for that one, Matt.
All right, Tom, what happened?
So, I mean, and we played a role. I mean, and I played a role, but many of us did because we attended the meetings in Lancaster to explain what was wrong, what was inappropriate with having a racial slur for a mascot. And I think we certainly influenced, along with those teams who were boycotting competition, and that's why the school board voted the way they voted. But again, that's another example of what Native kids experience in their high school, their grade school experience. They see this, even if you go to a school that doesn't have that. Oftentimes, you're going to compete against a school that has a name that's Warriors or Chiefs or Indians or Redskins or I mean, there's even a couple called Savage. In New York State, there's still 2 teams left, still 2 high schools that have Redskins for the name. One's out near Utica, it's the Oriskany, and down in the southern tier, Geneseo, Greenwood.
Over the weekend, I was skimming through the channels and I came across rugby, and there's a team, they're called the Chiefs. I don't know, I think Excelsior or Lauster. I don't even know the names, but during the game they started doing the warrior chant I don't know. I don't even know how to do it myself.
Mockery of it, really.
Tomahawk chop.
Yeah, tomahawk chop. The whole,
like the Seminoles or how they do that, or I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is? Just,
well, and again,
how's it go?
I don't know. I can't remember.
So as we as parents. Grandparents now, but as parents, and we see community members, we see what our kids are still facing. This is where racism has become embedded in the non-native culture to the point that, and again, when we talk about it being systemic, this is what we're talking about. So look, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we'll take a break here and we'll come back. I want to talk about this more because I want people to understand not only what the problem is, but what we need to do to stop it and what we need to do to finally put an end to some of this stuff. So we'll take a break here, go out with a little bit more music, and we'll come back with a little bit more. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
A razor wire cut you to the bone, son. It can make meanest long for home, and it's a crying shame. Just yourself to blame. And every morning when the sun comes up, you stand in your cage like a little pup. You wait for the man to turn the key. You step outside to greet. I raise a wife. It's a crying shame. Late at night when all the killers are down, teardrops splashing on that concrete ground. It's a dangerous game. They cry for their own pain. A razor wide of pain. Watch it gleam on that sunny day, tempting you to try beyond your weight. You try to swagger like you don't care, but you're always under that wire's glare. A razor wire cries for home. Worst kind of pain. Our baby mama's pain.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. Hey, I want to give a shout out to my sponsors, the ones who enable me to do this and also do the show in New York. I mean, if I didn't have folks supporting what I do, we wouldn't be able to do these two shows, Monday and Friday, and of course the show that I do in New York on Thursday. So I want to give a shout out to Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, good friends like Ed Schindler, Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and even the Seneca Nation, who stepped up and made contributions to the work that I do. And I support. I'm grateful for that support. And I also want to thank many others who've helped this program continue to educate, entertain, and inform over the last, we're into our 8th year. I thank all of you for joining in the fight and doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. I want to thank, again, CKWE for the simulcast and the rebroadcast of the program. I also want to thank Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying the program. And I want to thank all of you who share the program, whether you share it on Facebook, whether you are sharing the SoundCloud posts that I do of the audio after the fact, or whether you're sharing the YouTube videos of the program.
Or sharing the content of what they heard on the programs.
Well, and those of you who are engaging with us on Facebook and offering your comments, and it's not even sometimes just about the show. On the group pages that I have, Let's Talk Native and Let's Talk with John Kane, there's a lot of information that gets put on there, not just information that I post, but information that other people post, and I appreciate those that contribute to those group pages and weigh in with the comments, and the work that you do with some of your group pages and some of your postings, Matt, to stimulate these conversations, because that is the important thing. I see even during the break, I see Chuck Rinaldi weighed in, and again, thank you for listening, Chuck, and Chuck's comments are he's glad that I'm weighing in on this stuff. He expressed a little disappointment that there aren't more people that create the platforms for these discussions. But he mentions that he's at least glad that I'm doing it, because there's a point of view that simply is not being understood. And the thing about our point of view, people don't have to understand, don't necessarily have to agree with our perspective, but they should know that our perspective exists and that we have the same care for our kids that they do, and we want maybe not exactly the same things that other cultures may want for their children, but we do want to pursue happiness. We want our kids to have prosperous lives, and we want them to have hope for the future more than anything else. That is the thing that we promote a future for our kids. Now, whether somebody can play basketball in high school or not may not sound like a do or die situation. But for many kids, it is that spark that keeps them interested enough in school. It's that spark that keeps them from perhaps doing other activities that may not be conducive to quality of life. So it's all of that. But I want to get back on the subject matter here, because one of the things, and I see our buddy Mike weighed in here, it is important that people realize that, look, there are some schools, big schools that have these huge sports programs where they have coaches that are making, they're very well trained. They have degrees in personnel management and coaching and all kinds of stuff, and they're making that is their career. In schools like this, it's an extra $4,000 or $5,000 that these guys.
They don't even. Some of them don't even know what they do.
They have no certificates.
I actually did have I had a conversation with one of the board members, and I told him I'd like to see the school districts take it to the next level, specifically Gowanda, because that's where my nephews went. But I mean, in the future, I'd like to see hired coaches that know how to coach the game, not to just receive a paycheck, like other than teachers, because the teachers, they're just getting that extra money, like you said. And we have exceptional athletes that can take it to this next level and could possibly just not know how to get to that next level, but that proper coach can get them there.
Well, and a coach, his job is to coach all of the kids, not just single out.
He needs to know how to use
kids
all
that are going to
the
make
athletes.
him look good because of a win-loss record. And So I think the whole idea to do more, and let's face it, the Seneca Nation could be, it should be, and it really is, unwittingly or not, a valuable partner in some of these athletic endeavors, because not only have we had things like the Sailor Building all these years, but now we have a $20 million sports facility here, where we're hosting, tournaments on a regular basis. There's leagues league play that's happening, and it's a number of different sports that are happening there.
It was good to see. There was like a week ago, there was a lacrosse tournament that was hosted at the Allegheny Community Center and the Cattaraugus Community Center, and there was athletes from all over the place, like different states,
Canada?
Native, non-native, and it was there was some pretty good athletes there, but it was hard. It was what I wish could happen is I seen a lot of athletes from our area playing on 3 or 4 different teams, and if we could get all those athletes on the same team, we would have that exceptional team. We wouldn't even have to go outsource. I mean, we have athletes in the area that can perform well.
And that gets to what I was talking about in the first part of the show, is our kids are divided amongst three school districts, even at the earliest of ages. And as a result, our kids, even are better athletes, but even the kids who oftentimes, especially at those young ages, haven't even grown into their bodies yet, but they are having the opportunity to play with their own peers, with their with some of the kids that they essentially are growing up with, because they're separated into these school districts, and especially when they get into more of the organized sports. And I think the desire to have again, to go to the next level with more organization in terms of leagues and stuff like that, programs that and the Seneca Nation obviously has a role with that, but there still seems to be a disconnect. I remember when even some of those very coaches that would say, make a racist comment, it was their kids that were coming down here on territory playing with our kids. I mean, we have had less of the racial bias towards a white kid coming onto our territory to play than our kids feel playing in the school that is supposed to be their quote unquote alma mater. And
when I played baseball, we had a Babe Ruth team, and we had several athletes come down from Gowanda to play with our
because
athletes.
Gowanda didn't have one.
No, they had them, but they chose to come to the territory first.
Well, and you guys had good coaching. You had
exactly.
Going all the way back to your uncles and cousins that have been doing this for a long time. I mean, there is a pretty good history of a number of families who have been involved in coaching and supporting. I mean, and it goes all the way down to this next generation. I know Mike and his dad are taking kids into a lot of these Gus Macker tournaments and traveling to other native territories for a lot of these tournaments. And again, if the schools, if it wasn't such an adversarial relationship with some of these schools, and it isn't just Gowanda. I mean, I see Mike had posted that he was having some issues with some of the coaches from Lakeshore, and it's unfortunate because there should be more of a cooperative relationship with the families. But again, this is where some of that racial tension comes in. I don't think that the school districts appreciate and certainly acknowledge our contributions. Whether is it because of tax-based issues? I mean, is it because it's hard to know what the underlying reason other than overt racism, I guess. But there is that tension there, and as much as there are many areas where that tension doesn't exist, it seems to rear its head, and this is the kids, the ones who are going to be affected by it most are not us. It's the kids who are impressionable, who are still trying to formulate and know what their own identity is, and to be proud of who they are. And we talk about self-esteem issues. And look, if you look at native territories, and I'm not just talking about here in Cattaraugus or Allegheny, or Tuscarora or Tonawanda, any of these specific areas, but if in a general look at what's happening in native territories, we lead in all the categories you don't want to lead in. And now I just saw a post on Facebook. My friend Cindy had posted this story about a young girl, 8th grade, hoping that she can play. She wants to go play for Gonzaga. She's playing up in I don't know if it's North Dakota or and again, they've got basketball is one of the few sports in some of these territories because it doesn't involve the expense of a football team or even a lacrosse team because it's a smaller squad. So even teams that have even schools that only have 100 kids in an entire school can still field sometimes a very competitive basketball team. So basketball is one of those sports that has demonstrated a draw on native territories, and it's really unfortunate when you see the relationship and the tensions that we have when we interact with either a non-native school district that we compete against, or in the circumstance where our kids are playing in schools or are attending schools that put them in a situation where they are a rather significant minority. Even in their, even though the schools are located in their ancestral homelands. I mean, it really is. It's a tough situation.
I wish we had
tax-based issues.
What's that?
You mentioned tax-based issues.
Even though the people here are encouraged to vote on things like school board, school budgets and stuff like that, the native people here aren't paying property taxes. So whether there's a certain animosity that exists between the taxpayers of the village of Gowanda versus the parents who are sending their kids to the Gowanda school who don't necessarily. Now, I'm not saying the schools don't make money off of native kids because there are dollars that come from both the state. In fact, Matt, you and I.
That's why I had to question it.
Matt and I, we actually played a role. This is, it's a bit of an aside, but I'll mention it because since you brought it up.
That was kind of by accident.
Yeah, there's, for whatever reason, a number of schools, including Salmon River School.
Chuck brought it up.
Yeah. Chuck Rinaldi brought it up. But a number of schools, including Gowanda and Akron, and Salmon River, way up in Akwesasne or near Mohawk territory, they were being squeezed financially because the state wasn't coming off of the state aid that they are required by law, and we're talking about to the tune of millions of dollars here.
Gowanda had to take loan. That was the issue because Gowanda had to take loans out because of the shortcomings of those funds not coming in.
So we raised the issue.
I looked it up on Google and I checked it out, and sure enough, there was like all these different places that were short, thousands and tens of thousands of dollars.
Athletes, from the native athletes, not athletes, but schools,
just students.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And so because we raised it here, and enough people were listening to the show in various places, we started a little bit of a conversation that continued to the point where noise was made, and the state it was like in a really short turnaround with a couple weeks within weeks. Yeah. All of a sudden, the state came off of all that money, so all these schools were made whole. But again, I think the difference is, and the attitudes that that possibly could be stirred up is the fact that those monies aren't coming from us personally. So I don't know if some of that tension exists. I don't know that it should certainly exist with the school administrators, but certainly in the non-native community versus the native community, there may be a certain level of resentment when it comes to things like school budgets and who's footing the bill and how the bill is being footed. And, I'm not going to say that specifically and for sure, but it's reasonable to assume that some of those tensions that may contribute to some of the tensions. And, so I
don't know. I don't know if anybody really knows that, though.
No, there's no question that the people in the village of Gowanda know that we don't pay property tax.
That's true.
So they know that we aren't, and in fact, they may not know that money's come in lieu of that, from the state and federal government. Mm-hmm. But I can assure you that in these school districts that have native students in their in attendance, they know that we're not paying school taxes, and that may.
It's possible, I guess.
I'm pretty sure they know.
There.
I think they know because they have a. I know for a while there, students weren't able to go to Gowanda or Lakeshore and they weren't able to pick the school they went to because of there's imaginary borders on the territory.
They're trying to define where the school district
ends,
and
they're trying to adhere to that again because they know they're trying to corral that money from that location.
Money.
Yeah. So no, there's no question that there are issues that that contribute to some of those racial tensions. But regardless of any of those, our kids should not bear the brunt of it. The bottom line is our kids should not bear the brunt of it. And the idea of having athletics or any other co-curricular activity in the school is not to produce these singular athletes, but it's supposed to provide a program for all for all the kids. And look, granted, I understand you have to make the team, and they're going to put their best 5 on the floor supposedly at any given time, or on a football field or on a lacrosse field. But athletics should be something that encourage kids, not discourage them. No kid should feel beaten down by, especially, by the coaches, whether it's your coach or the coach of another team. There's no way that a kid should be belittled by somebody who's making an extra pot of money for added to their to their teaching salaries or whatever else. No kid should be made to feel that way. I mean, there's actually laws in the state of New York, the Dignity for All Students Act, although there's no bite to it, and that are supposed to, they're supposed to be anti-bullying laws and that kind of stuff. But usually that's a situation that involves, some sort of tensions between students. What is really, really difficult is to impress upon adults how systemic some of these racial tensions still exist. Yeah, and again, when you think about mascot issues, that's a place that should be easy to single out. But even something as easy as telling a school, look, it's inappropriate that you have a racial slur, for a mascot. It is still a message that is hard to get through to people because that
didn't qualify in the case of Lancaster.
Oh yeah, they'll give all kinds of reasons on why it's. I mean, I've literally had people that were so white say, "No, we're Redskins." I mean, looking at a room full of Native people, none of us want to be identified as Redskins, but they're saying they actually had a guy that they paid to come in who said
2 of them.
Yeah, well, the one guy who wrote a children's book, so it made him an authority. They said, "No, you folks aren't Redskins because you didn't have the warrior culture." I mean, he made up all this crap and tried to suggest that that Senecas or Oneidas or whatever else didn't have the warrior culture. So the fact that Lancaster was referring themselves to Redskins, it wasn't a slight at us. I mean, this is the how these guys try to rationalize this stuff. It's really incredible. But but again, I can't impress upon enough on how much some of this stuff continues, and that our kids. I mean, we see it in the curriculum. I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time. I mean, we talked about this on the last show, Matt. I talk to people who are older than me, and as I'm teaching them about something about like Abraham Lincoln or in the Mankato execution or any of the things that have happened historically, the Sullivan campaigns or any of this stuff. I have people, some significantly older than me saying, "How is it I don't know this? How could I have grown up my whole life and didn't know that what a residential school was?" And they aren't teaching that stuff here. I mean, and so that contributes to really that systemic racism, because you're not giving the Native kids a fair shake at knowing what their history is, and not just their history as victims of the United States, but as survivors of genocide. And so when you consider all that stuff, you end up with a white population that is oblivious to their own history, and a Native population who are simply just written out of history, and that's the way. And
often just as oblivious because they don't know.
Yeah, because they've never known. I mean, I take pride in using this platform, Facebook, my writing in general, columns that I've written, to share information that I'm aware of that I know people are not aware of, and part of it is to educate our own people, but also to educate the non-Native people so they understand. Look, there's a reason that Native territories are in the condition that they are in. And that reason is because it's policy driven. I mean, the fact that the Seneca Nation now has reached a certain level of affluence, both because the private sector, capitalized on their on their regulatory advantages and asserted sovereignty over certain taxable items in spite of the state's tax structures, and the fact that Seneca Nation has done gaming. Look, it's great that the Seneca Nation has reached a certain level of that affluence, but you can't just solve a multi-generational problem by throwing money at it, and that's why Native territories, some that are that may not be as impoverished as others, we are all facing the same problems. We all have the problem with convincing our kids that we are providing and that we have a life and a territory that can provide them hope for the future. And that's not what our kids are getting out of most of these public schools that are out there.
You mentioned systemic racism at the beginning of the show. You listed all the different forms that our kids and people in general are exposed to, and you forgot a big one was media.
Absolutely.
Just look at the history of where do people get their idea of what Native people are, and it's from the movies. I mean, that goes way back generations. In the 30s, that was the one. We're always looked at as the enemy. That's what is that real
Injuns, REEL Injuns. It's a great film that kind of shows how Native people have been improperly depicted in the film.
I always want to say let's get a movie going, and I don't know how to make a movie, but I will back anybody that really wants to get into making a movie that shows our people as how we are, and even in a realistic sense, instead of this Hollywood-driven,
And every time there is a film that even has a Native theme to it,
everybody gravitates to it.
And invariably, our people gravitate to it, but it's going to be Kevin Costner that's the hero, or it's going to be some other white guy that's Avatar. I mean, it's the white guy who's got to save the blue people, right? I mean,
he's the only one who had the gun too.
Even in the recent film Wind River, which was to address missing and murdered Indigenous women, it's Jeremy Renner who was the A-list actor in that, and he's the hero, right? So. I mean, so even when a film is written to address a
native
issue, anyway, we end up playing the secondary role, even in a film that's about us. I mean, Dances with Wolves is a classic example of that. I mean, there just happens to be a white woman, and there happens to be a white guy that can that can be the heroes. And
Thunderheart had half Native.
So no, I mean, but you're right. The media does add to this thing. I always cite a book by James Lowen called "Lies My Teacher Told Me," and it's not a book that just addresses how Native culture has been written improperly, but how much American history has been whitewashed for their own benefit to make it sound like every problem America ever faced has a happy ending, and they don't have happy endings. We have black people who are being killed, unarmed black people being killed by police. We have a poor 14-year-old kid who just got killed in Wisconsin. He had a knife in his hand and a cop shoots him. 14-year-old kid, an 8th grader. I mean, these tensions exist, and they exist not only between the authorities and our people, but they exist even in a coach to a kid, a teacher to a kid, a school administrator. I mean, these are the tensions that our kids are facing, and and I'll tell you very, very quickly because we are running out of time. When I know in the life that I lived, I thought that one of the things that I should do is try to shelter my kids from some of that racism. But it wasn't until, and my son is my youngest, until he started experiencing some of those tensions, even in Gwanda, I realized that his experience in confronting racism, even in school, was a good and valuable experience. Trying to shelter our kids from it. I think our kids have to see it, and we can't not expose them. So when you have an opportunity to take your kids to, whether it's an I Don't Know More round dance, or a rally or a protest or whatever it is, we should engage our kids, and our kids should know why we're standing up and what we're standing up for. I just think it's very important that we do that. Look, I don't know whether we solved the problem today with this show, but I did want to take and dedicate this program to this incident. I guess the good news is the coach who had made these inappropriate remarks and had insulted this Native kid ultimately is not coaching at least these kids anymore. But I hope it sends a strong signal to other coaches and to once again, send another signal to the school about what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. It's the best we can hope for, I guess. But we all have to play a role, and that's why I think it's important that we talk about it and that we continue to have these conversations.
Yeah.
So, all right. So thank you guys for listening. Well, we'll be
Go Bills.
make the playoffs. Yeah, right. All right. So we'll be back. We'll be back on Monday, and we'll see what plays out between now and then. Maybe we'll revisit some of this. We'll certainly find out how the Bills did.
Come back all lips.
All right. Thanks for listening. Yahweh.
I hope not.
How many years must this go on? How many tears must we cry? And how many promises are broken? How many more little white lies? Little white lies, little white lies, little white lies, little white lies. Keep on telling me your little white lies. Keep on telling me your little white lies. Teach your children.